to go ahead with it, I shall be introducing our speakers. Our first speaker today is Dr. Eucharia Nwaichi. And Dr. Eucharia Nwaichi is a science communication expert in environmental toxicology. She's a biochemist, and she has contributed significantly to understanding the plant biota interactions and influences of various farm inputs at remediation of polluted farms and promote green chemistry. She has developed a lot of policies, and she's poised in influencing policies with her science and increasing the space for women in science. Dr. Eucharia is well-traveled. She has been to 23 countries all over the world and has published her work in 80 reputable journals. And also, she has a patent in a plant-based technology for cleanup of oil-impacted soils. She's at the University of Port Harcourt and the Department of Biochemistry. She's actively pushing evidence-informed policy making and encouraging women and girls in science. She has received many awards, numerous awards for her works, and she, including the 2022 Evidence Leadership Producer Category Award. In 2020, she received the Evidence Leader Post Runner-Up. In 2020, Fellow of Next Hastings Forum. In 2016, she became an affiliate of the African Academy of Science, and she's a 2015 Fellow of Commonwealth. And in 2015, she received the University of Port Harcourt Merit Awardee for numerous contributions. And in 2015 also, she was part of the honors roll of the Faculty of Science of the University of Port Harcourt. And she's a 2013 Fellow of UNESCO Laureate for Women in Science, among others. And this is just a brief on our portfolio. And currently, she is leading the OWSD in University of Port Harcourt. And this is just a brief on our profile. And then we welcome Dr. Eucharia Nwaichi to present our talk. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Dr. Mojishala. Great to catch up with you once more. I want to appreciate this great association, or a network if you want, the network Nigerian Applied Microbiologists, NAM, Masterclass, for this opportunity to be with you this day. You know, it's a beautiful day from University of Port Harcourt, where I'm speaking from. So I want to welcome you to the ethics of doing research. Welcome everybody from all over Nigeria. I guess we have a non-Nigerian in the room. A lot of people are in the waiting room, so admin help to let them in. I've been letting some in. So because we are researchers, different levels of our careers and different fields of expertise, we are thinking of ethics of doing research, because research is the way to go for societal development advancement, for meeting the sustainable development goals that we have set for ourselves, because we signed in, we are co-signatories to SDG. So we are thinking of ethics, what makes us to do research in a particular way, other than commonsensical. So we go through the introduction and look at some scientific misconduct, what it means, and the forms that have been identified. And then what is the cost of doing research unethically? So by way of introduction, this is what you and I do. We go to different places. Hey, give me your diaries. I need your data. I need to study you. I need to study your environment. I need to give you information, because what we do in research is systematic investigation into sources, into materials. We're trying to provide knowledge, reach some conclusion, and establish facts. This is all we do with research. So ethics now will be the moral principles that guide us as researchers to conduct this research that are systematic in nature, without deception or any intention to harm the public or even those who are participating in the research with us. Whether we do that knowingly or unknowingly, that is what we call research ethics. So it is very different and distinct from common sense. So common sense will say the rightness or the wrongness. So this is right, this is wrong, and this is subjective, highly subjective. So then when we talk about research ethics, it's not subjective, because these are principles that have been laid down either by professional organizations, by societies, agencies of the government, different enclaves, putting this together to guide our behavior as researchers in the practice to know the right and the wrong. So there are principles guiding the ethics that we are hoping to deploy in our research enterprise, discussing intellectual property, frankly, in case like Moji told us, I have a patent. So in the process of the research, are you going to have some intellectual property? And if you do have, what happens to it? Who will be co-owners or who are the owners? What are the limitations? So we need to declare this open so everybody is happy, everybody understands before they get into it. Conscious of multiple roles, people playing different roles. Some are advisory, some are collaborators, some are just service providers that we paid for, so they don't need to gain authorship or gain entry into the co-owners of the patent. So be very much aware of the multiple roles played by people in the space of the research. So informed consent rules. So inform people what you want them to and what they will do actually in the research as a researcher. Respect confidentiality. When you say, I'll take your information, I won't reveal where you come from or the political party you belong to or your gender, maybe you're a transgender or some private thing that the participant had wished not to reveal to the public. So if you make a commitment, please keep to it. Tap into ethics resources like what we're doing now. This is ethics resources. Listen to lectures on ethics, books, and all of that. Honesty, we can't emphasize enough on honesty. We have to be sincere in what we're doing with the data gathering, the collection, the analysis, the methods, the procedure, the design in its entirety, and then the publication, the presentation to the society, because this day we are not advocating for research that gets to the shelf, but we want research that will meet the societal needs. So all through the spectrum, we want to see honesty, objectivity. There must be objective for you, which you set out to do research, and being careful all through the process. Openness, can we really emphasize on it? So misconduct is something that's been flagged all over the globe in terms of ethics, the rightness or the wrongness in the conduct of our investigation that are systematic. So we want to think about misconduct. What do we do that becomes misconduct? So if you look at this young man, he can decide to falsify some information. You see his face here, he becomes darker instead of being yellowy. And then in the bag here, you see like a falcon tube for your microbiological investigations. And the other way becomes an atom, like an astronomer, a physicist. So this is what we call misconduct, violation of standard codes of scholarly conduct or any ethical behavior in conducting your professional search. People in Denmark will say it's an intention or gross negligence leading to fabrication or false credit given to people, emphasis given to a scientist when they haven't done much. In Sweden, they say it's an intentional distortion of the research process by fabrication of data, test, hypothesis, methods from another researcher's manuscript or publication, distorting the process in different ways. So the consequences can be damaging to both the perpetrators and the society. It's important to note that misconduct is underscored when there is an intention to deceive. So honest errors related to sloppiness, poor record keeping, miscalculations and biases, self-deception, even negligence do not constitute misconduct. So for you to have a misconduct, there has to be intention to deceive. Otherwise, it's not a misconduct. It can be an unethical behavior, but not a misconduct. Let's say, for example, you have 50 pairs of samples. You want to do an investigation, maybe as a microbiologist, you need to establish the number of biota in a system. Let me say in food, okay? And you needed to use 50 samples by your procedure to arrive at the conclusion. And then you've done 45 and a friend of yours is calling you, please, we need to get out. And it's okay, I've done 45. I can just, the 5, I can make extrapolation from what I have from the 45. So in the broader sense, this is not a misconduct, but this is unethical behavior because you never can tell. In science, we do not guess. So you never can tell what happens to the 5, what information they may be giving you. So it will be unethical, but not a misconduct because there should be an intent to deceive before we say this is a misconduct in the research enterprise. So reasonable disagreements about research methods, procedures, and interpretation do not constitute research misconduct. Reasonable disagreement about methods, yeah? Because I, as a reviewer, may disagree with your method. It's not that you have conducted yourself in such a way that will give it broad categorization misconduct because I disagree. Okay, this method is obsolete, or some interests may make me inclined to some methodology which you have not used. So you have not conducted yourself in such a way to end misconduct, but it may be unethical depending on the outcome of the agreement, the disagreement. So you have to make sure there's an intent to deceive when you are looking at misconduct. There are several causes of scientific misconduct: career and funding pressure, publish or perish syndrome in the university. For most of us here at university, uh, lecturers and students, research students, some industry practitioners, if there are growth prospects with publications or with getting a patent or with any level of intellectual property acquisition. So this can force people, coerce people, or lure people into scientific misconduct or funding. You need to get funding for your laboratory, for your institution, for your department. The quest, the unholy quest to get this can get you into scientific misconduct, institutional failures of oversight. So a lot of institutions do not care. So this can lead to misconduct when they judge researchers unethically, so it can get to misconduct. If the oversight function is activated by the R&D and similar institutions of parastatals or formations in research institutions, we will be having low rates of scientific misconduct. Inadequate training, we can't emphasize that enough. So people are not trained, you get out from the PhD and then you become a lecturer in our climb. Even some are master students and they're already supervising others. And students in the curriculum, how have we been able to integrate research enterprise in the curriculum? Do we teach scientific conduct? Do we teach research ethics in our universities? Most times, no. So erosion of the practice of mentoring, art of mentoring, learning from the older heads. So we stand on old shoulders to get taller. But these days, the younger people want to be self-sufficient. They want to just exist and become the big guys in the place. And then they have to cut corners, commit a lot of scientific misconducts to get to their destination. So mentorship needs to be reactivated. So you see that all of these factors could fall under the structural, the cultural. So some culture, people don't value ethics in some culture. You just evolve. Situational factors, because you want to be promoted, individual factor, because naturally you like corruption. You have been trained or you grew up in a place where corruption is the order of the day. So you have to get in. Then organizational factors, when the organization is not strong, they do not preach and practice ethics in terms of research. So there are ethical dilemmas that also will play when we practice research. in terms of assessing misconduct. If different people disagree about proper course of action, there is no broad consensus if you look at it about what should be done. Okay, so I have tried to bring out some things you may have to consider when trying to resolve such arguments. Okay, so different people, different perceptions about a case surrounding research. Okay, so this situation will create difficult decisions for research, and we call these ethical dilemmas or moral dilemmas around research. So when these occur, if I give example, if I've conducted a research sponsored by big funders and I have a lot of data, and I look at it, when I separate my data, I see 5 papers, and I publish just one. An organization again reaches me, another organization, to share my research data with them. Okay, so it may be perceived from different angles. There'll be a lot of ethical dilemma. If I share my data, haven't published with them, if they do not consider ethics or we do not get into some agreement, research agreement, so they may publish my data before me. So I may decide to hold back my data, which is not good. I may give to them, which is not good for me. So this becomes an ethical dilemma. So if you run into such crisis, ethical dilemma, what do you do? Consider the choices that probably have the best overall consequences for science and society, not about you. If the people who are looking for the data in example I've given in the case, so if they're going to conduct some research that this will help them to get to a destination that gets the society to the next level, I should be thinking of that instead of my personal gain. Which choice should stand up to further publicity and scrutiny? If we subject the problem, the ethical dilemma, to public scrutiny, what would the public be saying? Are they going to blame me for hoarding information? Or they're going to blame me for giving out information without handling the data properly, publishing or patenting or doing all I need to do with it to get credit as the researcher or to my institution that needs the credit? So you may think about that. So go with the public, what the public will likely do with such situation. Then which choice could you not live with? This is a no-no for me. It is crazy because you have to be well. The wellness of a researcher is very important. So the wellness, which choice could you not live with? So run away from that. Think of the wisest person you know. What would he or she, if he is the wisest person or she, what would she do in this situation? What would he do? You can contact the person, seek counsel from this wisest person you are judged in terms of the research space. What choice would be the most just, fair, or responsible? By responsibility, we mean no harm. We want to do no harm. So if you consider no harm, and all of these considerations are put here, that will help you to decide on how to settle the scientific dilemma or the research dilemma that arise in your research space. So we have 3 forms of misconduct that have been adjudged by National Health Institute or even the US government by classifying research misconduct into 3: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And that is called the FFP. So if you do not find, a lot of arguments have been going on in the space, if this actually is holistic enough to represent scientific misconduct. But because there are reservations that could not be agreed upon by scientific professional organizations in the research space, so these 3 have been agreed upon by many of our major stakeholders in the research space. So fabrication, falsification, and the plagiarism. So if any of these or combination of these have been committed by the researcher, the perpetrator, so we say research misconduct has happened. So when you make up results or make up recording and reporting them, the fabricated results, so we say that is fabrication. So there will be a minor form of fabrication where references are included, sometimes in your field. So you have a big name in the field. You think that when you cite the person in your work, the reviewers or the editor will consider this work very well researched because you cited a big name in the field, but you did not consider the person's work. You just put it. Maybe the title of the work says, maybe, what will I say, time-dependent dose response, and you're working on dose response. You just cite that without reading it to know what they have said. People do that. That is fabrication, but it's a minor form of fabrication. Another is falsification, where you manipulate research materials, equipment, or processes. So equipment that may go through 1 hour, 2 hours, you manipulate the equipment to perform in 30 minutes. So you can meet your deadline to release a particular set of data. So you're falsifying, you're changing or omitting data or results. Maybe this data, if I put it, it doesn't support what I want people to know. That is falsification. So second form of research misconduct. And the last one, which is the most popular now, is the plagiarism, appropriation of another person's ideas or work, processes, invention, intellectual property, without giving them due credit. This is what we call plagiarism. But more interesting these days that we are self-plagiarizing. We are having multiple publications of the same content in different places with different titles, the same data, the same table. We find it in publication A, publication B, and they are not cited. This is actually a misconduct. So scientific journals explicitly ask authors not to do this. It's referred to as salami. So those of us who like salami, like identical slices put layered on one another. So that's why they call it salami, the salami syndrome. You collecting your work and layering them in different places without referencing yourself. So once you let it out, once you push it out, it becomes a work of research and no longer your own solely. So you must cite yourself if you must use it. And you need to take down self-citation when you are writing papers from research data. These are common unethical practices too that we have found in this place, thinking about the ethics in research, ghostwriting, where someone other than the named authors make major contribution. So maybe people have worked so hard to write and they've sent to you, maybe your students, and their names are not in the work. So this is ghostwriting. So there are unseen hands that have contributed substantially that should have gained entry into authorship or into joint ownership of inventions that you have patented or other forms of intellectual property, and they are not declared. So this is ghostwriting. We also have the guest authorship, where people, for some reasons, maybe your supervisors who were not part of the research, maybe after supervising you, they think that they should gain entry into everything that you write. Or sometimes they muzzle their ways, those who are the seniors in your department. And they think for me to recommend you for promotion, you have to make my name get into your publications. This is guest authorship. Some other times it's done by the researchers by themselves. They think that getting these names will help paper acceptance rate. So they put names that they think they are well published without them making contributions to the work of research. And then this is called guest authorship. It is not good, please. So not declaring substantial shareholding in a funding institution. Maybe a company where I'm a shareholder, say 10% shareholder, and I don't declare that I'm a shareholder and they funded my research. So that constitutes unethical practice in the research space. What are the costs then? Why do we think that research ethics must be followed? What are the costs of practicing unethically? Yeah, if we practice unethically, we're going to have a lot of costs arising due to the individuals, the institutions. I'll be showcasing them in the next slide, but this shows you what is happening in the research field. Duplicate publication, errors, plagiarism, you can see. So this is increasing, looking at what happened in 1977 and then taking it to 2011. So you can see the factors that are growing and getting more recognized. But somehow they existed, but the attention was not there. So the cost will come down on the individual. It will come down on reputation of the employer, say the university, say the industry, say the government where you are employed, say the journal that published the work that been fabricated. Direct financial cost is huge. In the research, in the study done by NHS in the NIH in the US recently, they found that over 100 million US dollars was direct financial cost in terms of plagiarized works that have been retracted. So the money put out there in research funding, these are all direct financial cost. Broader social cost. So how does the social space look at it? What happens to the social cost? Losing your integrity. What of science as an enterprise? What of other aspects of research? So people do not trust the science to make policies because of the plagiarism, because of the misconduct in its entirety, and opportunity cost, the opportunity that present themselves from 1 to 4, from the individual damage, from the reputation, from direct financial cost, from the broader social perspective. So if you look at the individual, you see the wasted effort of trusting researchers, building on falsehood. People who are collaborators, innocent for that matter, they trusted you because you have falsified data. You look like you have reputation. So they trusted you. And then what happened? Every trust has been watered down because all that they have built on have been on falsehood. So what of time, energy, and funds that are sunk into that enterprise? At the end of the day, misconduct raises ugly head. What of the investigations, the committees that are being set up, the panels that will investigate if you have committed it or if the group has committed it? So this is money, this is time, this is energy. What of the editors that spent a lot of time going through your work, sleepless nights? What of the reviewers that did a lot of work to give you feedback and you only deceived everybody? So it is huge when you talk about the individual cost. So you also see that it is a mess, damaging the career of the perpetrators. If you consider one man they call Gupta, who has published for over decades. And then the Gupta has a very good reputation in paleontology in India. And now the career has been damaged even beyond the lifetime. So when you mention that name, different organizations have come up, even government agencies, to declare that he has falsified data about geology of India. Okay, so that career has been damaged for life. His descendants, people associated with him, what are people who dwelt on data he collected to be able to make policies in their different countries, in their different research institutions? This is fraud. What of the retaliation or other negative repercussions that are suffered by good faith whistleblowers, those who noticed this and blew the whistle? So there may be retaliation. People may go after them, especially if they're very influential. So this also is a huge cost. What of the rates at which fabricated data are cited? Like the Gupta I mentioned in paleontology, if you check Gupta and check paleontology, you see a lot of citations. So people have cited, and when you retract, unfortunately, you cannot retract the cited works. You can only retract the main work. So citations are gone on and people have moved on with the cited materials and they have used them to make research designs. They've used them to build maybe equipment. They've used them to build methodologies. They use them to make policies. And this is crazy. What are the reputational costs? People cannot be trusted. If the funders, let me say, funders, Marie Curie have funded you, then that means they're not doing due diligence. They'll be adjudged. So their reputation will go down in accessing further funds from Bill Gates and other people, bigger people who will give money to support the work of research. High rate of irreproducibility of research results because they have been falsified, because there is great misconduct in the process. So it cannot be reproduced. You have the same conditions, although most time clinical trials are not highly reproducible, but misconduct will also deter the possibility, the potential for the reproducibility to happen. So this is a big problem for us. So in conclusion, ethics in research defines science, my dears co-researchers, and its relevance to the society. So we really need to care about ethics in research. Unethical practices we've seen in research make validation of results unduly cumbersome for researchers and makes for low uptake of research evidence in policy making. Finally, the ugly rising trend of research misconduct needs to be stopped now. By who? By you, by me, by government, by stakeholders, funders, by journals, publishing houses. So it's a concerted effort that required by practitioners and all stakeholders, including you and I and the students. We need to teach, we need to mentor, we need to learn from others, we need to mentor, pass on knowledge, give out knowledge as much as you can so that we can practice ethically and have a society that is built on believable data sets and we can make progress. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank Professor Desope for getting some materials across to me and all of you for rapt attention. My contact is on this, as you can see on the screen, and I'll be willing to take questions and comments as when the organizers will call for them. Thank you.
Wow. Dr. Nwaichi?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, can you stop slide sharing? Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Eucharia. That was a wonderful one. And we'll go ahead with the program as we go on. At the end of the second speaker's talk, that is when we'll be having our question and answer. So please, let's keep writing down our questions and answer as we progress. And we thank Dr. Nwaichi for that. She just spoke to us on ethics in doing research. We'll be having our second speaker with us, Dr. Temitope Sogbanmu. Dr. Temitope Sogbanmu is a lecturer at the University of Lagos, and she's an environmental toxicologist with several years of experience in environmental risk assessment and management of organic pollutants in various environmental media, using classic and emerging ecotoxicological tools. This is also, she does this with a view to develop and provide targeted environmental management advice to regulators and policy makers. And she's a recipient of several awards and several grants and fellowships. She's a reviewer of several high impact factor journals. She's a member of an editorial board of Integrated Environmental Assessment and Management, IEAM, and Environmental Water Quality. She's an affiliate member of the African Academy of Sciences, and she's a vice president of the Nigerian Young Academy and an advisory board member of One Health and Development Initiative. She's an advocate of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 6, 11, 13, and 14, and also African Union Agenda 2063 Goal 7. Science and risk communicator, evidence for policy and researcher visibility for social impact. She holds a PhD in environmental toxicology and pollution management and lectures in the University of Lagos. She currently leads the evidence use in environmental policy making in Nigeria, a project, and as well as the Environmental Evidence Synthesis and Knowledge Translation Research Group, the Tetford Center of Excellence in Biodiversity Conservation and Ecosystem Management in the University of Lagos. She's happily married with children. Dr. Temitope Sogbanmu will be presenting our talk on ethical practices in collaboration and the implications of non-ethical conducts for globalization. Thank you very much. Dr. Temitope, you are welcome on board.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation, and it's really an honor to be able to speak after Dr. Nwaichi. We work together, and she's also my mentor in this field as well. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be joining us from all over the world. Like I've been rightly introduced, Temitope Sogbanmu, and I'm going to endeavor to speak to this topic that have been assigned to me today: ethical practices in collaboration and their implications for non-ethical conduct in globalization. I took time to actually listen to Dr. Nwaichi's presentation, and I think she has laid a very good ground for me to work on. So I am going to be sharing my thoughts. And because, I think maybe because this talk is happening on the Saturday, I'm thinking it's a bit more informal because I'm hoping really, and what I'll be doing here is to share not a textbook knowledge really or a theoretical basis on this topic, but to share really from my practical experiences and some practical tips. As read in my introductory, my invitation letter, a lot of the people who are in this group or here in this meeting are early career researchers. So I believe I'm going to be speaking with postgraduate students, those who just completed PhD, who are getting into research, and those who are, migrating into independent research, and perhaps one or two senior colleagues who might also be here. And so in order to speak to this topic, I'm going to be sharing, permit me, I will introduce the topic and some keywords in those topics. And then I will share from my background, my expertise, my research areas and projects, my affiliations and networks, and then I would land or end with some ethical practices for collaboration in globalization. And in the course of this presentation, I'm going to actually be speaking to the topic as I take each part of the areas, starting with my background and all of that. I just wanted to say that the views that I'm going to be sharing in this presentation are mine, so they're personal, except where I reference specific authors. And so they're not necessarily representative of my institution's views on this topic that I'll be talking about. Just to provide a bit of grounding on what we're talking about today. I did a bit of research, and I see that when we talk about ethical practices, particularly when we are talking about it in the case of research, we are talking about what are those values, what are those principles, what are those guidelines, what are those rules that you live by, or that guides one's research, guides your research in terms of the design of the research, in terms of the conduct of his research itself, from design up to publishing. And even nowadays, we talk about communicating, science communication, outreach, and all of that, and all the practices that it involves. That's what we're talking about in ethical practices. What are those principles that guide it? And as I've thought about it over the years, I strongly feel that research ethics and ethical practices in research are highly reflective of the values that a person holds of him or herself, right? For some of us, we wanted from the onset to do research, so to be in academia. Some of us, for some other persons, our venture into academia and research was accidental or was backed by socioeconomic issues or cultural issues, or just the interest of passion to add value to the world, right? And we know that research is a systematic way of, contributing to knowledge on a certain topic or in a certain area. So what are these values that we're talking about? Of course, when we talk about research ethics, there's a very large underpinning of morals, right? Morals, etiquette, what's your philosophy? Okay, what's your sense of right and wrong? Right? What's your motivation? I talked about that. What's your passion for the research? What social values do you have? The social context also matters. Like I mentioned, if you are venturing into research, was it really underpinned by socioeconomic conditions? Was it that maybe you couldn't get a job and so you just found yourself in research and so it's a means to an end really? What is the truth that you believe that you want to put out there and that you want to underpin the research that you do? What's your character? Do you believe in fairness? What's your purpose? What's your attitude? What standards do you have? Do you have any respect for yourself? and then respect for the other persons and of course the society that you're hoping that your research will impact. What are your criteria for defining this? Do you have some rules that you live by so that when you get to a point where you are not sure whether this is right and wrong, you can say, okay, these are the rules. Is this right or wrong? Does this align with my own underpinning values? Any sense of decency, right? Equality. What are the conventions? I mean, research ethics now are so broad. You know, ethics really started really in the medical sciences and health research. But we are now having and talking about health, research ethics now, even in this fourth industrial revolution where we have, you know, an outrage of social media, and then you have to think about what are the ethics that you have to abide with when you are communicating, for instance, on social media, your research. And then the other key point in this topic is collaboration. What are we talking about when we're talking about collaboration? We already understand that when you're talking about research, you know, research is primarily a systematic way of doing things. And the end aim is that you want to contribute to knowledge. So when we're talking about research collaboration in this context, we may define that as working together of researchers, so of people who conduct research in order to achieve a common goal. And in the case of a research collaboration, your common goal usually would be to produce new scientific knowledge, to add to the body of knowledge, or to, you know, add value to a certain area. And even innovation now, research is also going into innovation. It could also be coming together to bring about new products, new ways of doing things, new ideas. Common goal is that you are intending to contribute to knowledge in order to impact society or your world. So when we talk about globalization now, you're talking about what are the type of studies that you're doing that you can work with other researchers, which is collaboration. And that collaboration can start right from within your unit at your department, or within your department, or within your faculty, or within your university. It could be within your state, within your country, within your sub-region, within the continent, and of course, globally now. So globalization now is even much more pronounced because now you really don't have to travel to somewhere, to Canada, in order to be able to collaborate with somebody. If you go online and check somebody's, for instance, if you check Google Scholar or you go on Scopus and you look at maybe top researchers in your field and you say, okay, I would like to collaborate with this person on a certain area that aligns with my research interests. You know, nowadays you just need to write a mail to that person or send the person a DM, and then collaboration really can start from there. So we're talking about collaboration in the context of globalization that cuts across from very local and minute skills like collaborating within your unit or even collaborating with your students to collaborating with large cohorts of researchers. Now we see collaborative papers where you have 3,000 authors, 1,000 authors, all from different areas and different parts of the world. And you know, with the SDGs, globalization and collaborations are even one of the key SDGs, SDG 17. It talks about partnership for goals, partnership and equity in ensuring collaborative research across board, across disciplines. So having known all of this, let me share my own foray, or starting with my background in research, in collaboration, and in globalization. So I have a background in zoology, and then I have postgraduate degrees in environmental toxicology and pollution management. And I did all of this at the University of Lagos, except for part of my PhD bench work, which I did at the King's College London in 2014. So the picture that you see up here is actually me in the lab at the King's College London. So my actual physical foray into, you know, collaborative research at the international level, meaning leaving my country, Nigeria, right, to go elsewhere to another country, started really in 2014, right? And so that was my first foray in international, going actually abroad with mobility to do research. And then following that, I've conducted postdoctoral research at the University of British Columbia in Canada, and then at the Eucharia University in in Germany. And these are basically research experiences. Of course, I've traveled in the course of this time for conferences and all of that relating to research as well to present papers. So what are my key research areas? So like I said, with a background in zoology and in environmental toxicology and pollution management, my expertise cuts across environmental sciences, specifically environmental impact assessments. In environmental toxicology, I've collaborated and do research in biomarkers development and assessment in model animal organisms like earthworms, like fish, like mice, snails, and in the course of doing that, we also do ecological risk assessment and human health risk assessment. In aquatic toxicology, particularly aquatic toxicology, my research at the King's College London, was strictly on aquatic toxicology. And there I was, then embryo toxicology studies were just starting. And I also looked at studies with early life stages of fish species. So let me start there in terms of what were the ethical issues that I had to grapple with in this, my first physical international research collaboration. So here I was a PhD student. I was already a faculty member. I was an assistant lecturer at the University of Lagos. And the first thing was that this collaboration, the research I went to do, was facilitated by the collaboration that my supervisor already had with this faculty member at King's College London. So you can see that in research collaboration, it might not be a collaboration that was generated or instituted by you. It can be a collaboration that is facilitated by a mentor or by a supervisor at the time in my case. But one of the key things in collaborative research, so I was the second person in our research group that was going on a research collaboration with this person who was already a collaborator with my boss. But there are some things that I went away with. So my supervisor did not really tell me in black and white and say, this is how you should conduct yourself. This is what you should do. But I knew that I was getting a once in a lifetime experience, which depending on how I handle this research collaboration could make or mar my career and even that of my supervisors or my research group. Why is that so? We know that, increasingly we have disparities in terms of capabilities, particularly capability in new research methods and techniques in what we call the global south. So basically in underdeveloped and developing countries, and then in developed countries like the UK in this case, the US and Canada. So here I was coming from a place where I didn't really have much infrastructure or facility to do the research that I needed to do. And then I had the opportunity to do the research in this very big Ivy League school and with this person. Now, one of the things I went away with was that I had to be truthful. I had a short time, I had just 6 months to deliver my PhD work and complete my research assignments. One of the things that could have happened and almost happened was for me to falsify or fabricate data. And why is this so? As for many of us here who has conducted at least a BSc research, you know that research is not always positive, meaning that when you conduct that research, you don't always get what we call a positive result, as in sometimes you don't get results. Sometimes the results you get or you expect is not what you get. Sometimes you do the research and you're not even getting anything, and you need to deliver a thesis. So I had that experience. 3 months, 4 months into my research, I wasn't making headway. I had spent money. My supervisor was following up on me. My UK supervisor was also concerned. But
Hello, Dr. Tokwe. It seems okay. It seems we have lost Dr. Temitope for now.
It's the white. It's the white bread. They white. Oh, no good.